Are you not afraid of interviewing the conqueror of British Empire as you are British? You are not afraid of...
Idi Amin ranks as one of the most brutal dictators of the 20th century. His reign in Uganda saw hundreds of thousands of people disappear. Amin was neither well-educated nor particularly intelligent, but he had a pleasant cunning which often outflanked cleverer opponents, including Uganda's civilian president, Milton Obote, who was replaced in the 1971 coup. Welcome to Afriverse's story. On today's episode, we take a deep dive into the life of General Idi Amin Dada. Idi Amin ruled over Uganda with an iron fist and a particularly evil sense of humor. His reign was marked by brutality that earned him the nickname, the Butcher of Uganda. His reputation was well earned through his depraved antics, which included, by his own admission, cannibalism. For 8 long years, Uganda shivered in fear. Idi Amin was mad, bad, and utterly terrifying. Do stay tuned and enjoy the ride. There are many claims about where and when Idi Amin Dada Ume was born. The claims range from 1923 to 1928, and it is thought to have been born in the capital Kampala or in the town of Koboko in the north of Uganda. Idi Amin was brought up as a Muslim, as his father had converted from a Roman Catholic to Islam. At a young age, he was abandoned by his father and raised by his mother, a traditional herbalist. It is claimed that Amin's father was a member of the Kakwa ethnic group, while his mother was a member of the Dubara ethnic group. He went to an Islamic school where he dropped out after only 4th grade. He then joined the British colonial army. Idi Amin joined the King's African Rifles in 1946 and worked as an assistant cook. He also received military training at this time, and in 1947, he was transferred to Kenya as part of the 21st KAR Infantry Battalion. His only distinction in terms of overseas service was to be identified as a member of the scrimmage among Ugandan troops stationed in Mauritius, which was put down by the British-led police. The other black mark in his regimental book was an entry indicating, in 1955, that he had been repeatedly infected and cured of venereal diseases. He is said to have acquired his taste for bordellos and for a variety of women when serving in army posts in the sheikdoms of the Gulf from Aden northwards in colonial times. In 1962, commanding troops of the 4th KAR, he carried out the Tokman Massacre, an operation that began as a simple assignment to check cattle rustling by tribesmen in the Turkana region of Kenya. Complaints from the villagers reached the British authorities in Nairobi. Bodies were exhumed from pits, and it became clear that the victims had been tortured, beaten to death, and in some cases, buried alive. But Amin was lucky. The British authorities in Kampala, with Uganda's independence only a few months away, decided it was politically impossible to court-martial one of the country's only 2 black officers. The man who was later to be toppled by Amin, Dr. Milton Obote, concurred. He served in campaigns against Somali rebels as well as the Mau Maus in Kenya. In 1953, he had been promoted to sergeant. Amin was an imposing figure. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches, he became the Ugandan light heavyweight boxing champion. He played many other sports and garnered a significant amount of fame. In 1962, Uganda gained independence from Britain, and Milton Obote was selected Prime Minister. Having caught the attention of Obote, Idi Amin rose through the ranks and served in important positions. By 1964, he had been promoted to commander of the army. In 1965, Idi Amin and Prime Minister Milton Obote were accused of attempting to smuggle gold and ivory into Uganda. The Ugandan parliament demanded an investigation, upon which Obote formed a new constitution, abolishing the position of the presidency, which had been largely ceremonial. Idi Amin then led an attack on the presidential palace and forced President Kabaka into exile, and Milton Obote was named president. In December 1969 came the mysterious episode when assassins, never identified, tried to kill Obote as he walked away from a party rally. Badly wounded, he ordered an investigation while recovering in the hospital. Amin could not be found, but turned up later at the meeting where Brigadier Okaya, the deputy army commander, indicated the net was closing in. A date was set for a second meeting on January 26, when decisions would have been taken and the guilty ones named. At 11 p.m. on January 25th, shots were heard in the Kampala suburb where the deputy commander was leading. Friends called the police and went to the house to find Brigadier Okaya and his wife both dead from multiple bullet wounds. Nothing had been stolen. These developments increased Obote's power and made Idi Amin the second most powerful man in Uganda. If you find this video worthwhile, please support our channel by liking our videos and subscribing to the channel. Now let's get back to the video. Throughout the later half of the 1960s, a rift appeared between Idi Amin and Obote. Obote had moved to the left of the political spectrum, which worried many Western governments that their capital interests would be in danger. As a former member of the British colonial army, Idi Amin represented an opportunity for the Western powers to install a leader loyal to the Western doctrines. As such, Western nations, particularly the United Kingdom, began to support Idi Amin over his potential rival. Later in 1970, while the Obote government was still in power, police investigating an armed hold-up harassing a gang of condos and the local ward of thugs in illegal possession of arms. Under questioning, one of them indicated he took his orders from Brigadier Amin. This was embarrassing, as Obote was about to promote Amin to Chief of Staff. So the police commandant, Inspector General Oyima, took no action. The condos were released from detention and were killed in unexplained circumstances soon afterwards. Idi Amin had been promoted to commander of all armed forces, but in October of that year, Obote rescinded this command and took control himself. In January of the following year, suspecting that Obote would arrest him for corruption, Idi Amin launched a coup and took control of the government while Obote was attending a Commonwealth Prime Minister's Conference in Singapore.
The members of the Uganda Army and Air Force decided to take over from the civilian role because of the last arrangement which were made by the Dr. Apollo Milton Obote to disarm the all tribe of Uganda except his own tribe Langi and Acholi. And also that is the point which brought all this problem.
Oyima was arrested and executed in 1977. Amin promised that his government would hold free and fair elections to select a new leader as soon as possible when the situation had normalized. As this reign of terror got underway, the Chief of Justice, Kabimu Kiwanuka, the former Prime Minister of Uganda, was arrested in his robing room and brutally killed by plain-clothed thugs. The Anglican Bishop, Janani Luwum, was killed in a simultaneous car crash in Kampala. Other leading figures were expunged in similar brutal circumstances, including the Vice-Chancellor of the university. About 6 weeks after Idi Amin seized power, came the explosion at Makindye prison in Kampala, where 32 army officers crammed in the tiny cell were blown up by a dynamite. The group was made up of Christian tribes such as the Acholi and Langi, which had supported the government of the fallen President Obote. It now seems that the 2/3 of Uganda's army soldiers, out of the total 9,000 men, were executed in Amin's first year in power. The pattern had been set for the mass bloodletting that was to come. As soon as he had seized power, Idi Amin acted swiftly to consolidate his position. He entrenched the military as the ruling force in Uganda and surrounded himself with people he could trust. Shortly after he seized power, Idi Amin began to receive military and financial support from Great Britain and Israel. When he asked Israel for advanced military equipment, however, he was refused. As a result, Idi Amin denounced Zionism and sought trade with Libya. Muammar Gaddafi immediately loaned Idi Amin $25 million and promised to continue to support his regime. On September 17, 1972, Ugandan exiles led by Milton Obote launched a poorly coordinated attempt to overthrow Idi Amin with 1,000 troops, and as a result, Idi Amin launched a purge of Obote supporters from the armed forces. This purge expanded to include people from all walks of life and all sectors of Ugandan society. People of the Acholi and Lango ethnic groups were primarily targeted in the initial purges. People were murdered at will, and their bodies were dumped wherever it was convenient. Among the important sectors targeted were those with significant influence. This included bureaucrats, journalists, lawyers, doctors, politicians, judges, religious leaders, and even students. This violence continued at the same pace for the entire 8-year tenure of Idi Amin's dictatorship. It is difficult to determine how many people were killed, but it is estimated that it could be as much as 500,000 people. Amin filled the government with ethnic and religious affiliations, mainly from the Kakwa ethnic group and the people from South Sudan. Most of his government was made up of Muslims. Along with the preferential treatment of certain ethnic groups and religions, Idi Amin persecuted others. Uganda was home to roughly 80,000 Asians, mainly from the Indian subcontinent. Most of them were born in Uganda. He was a man who acted on hunches and impulses. His decision to expel the 35,000 Asians of Uganda in the space of 3 months between August and November 1972 came to him, he said, in a dream. He expounded the dream the next day to the troops at a military post in the north, and the policy came into effect before nightfall.
Really, sir?
Yes, they must go to their country.
Even nationals of Uganda?
If they want to go, they are welcome to go.
What will happen to these people if they don't go by the time of it?
I think they will be sitting like they are sitting on the fire. I will tell you this. You just wait after 3 months.
What will you do to them?
Okay, you will see.
You said you wanted Uganda.
I think they will not sit comfortable here in Uganda. I will tell you this. I must actually tell you the truth.
Have you asked the British to take them away?
I am not responsible for building them transit camp.
Have you asked the British to take them away?
Yes, it is the British High Commissioner here, his responsibility. I have told him.
Idi Amin ordered seizing their properties. As the Asians accounted for 90% of Uganda's tax revenue, including the vast majority of businesses, the Ugandan economy completely collapsed. Following the expulsion of the Asians, Idi Amin broke all ties with Great Britain and Israel. India broke ties with Uganda over the mistreatment of Asian Ugandans. From 1973 onwards, the Soviet Union began providing arms, armory, and technical assistance to Uganda. It saw Uganda as a key player in counterbalancing Chinese influence in Tanzania and Western influence in Kenya. This close working partnership also meant that Idi Amin could send as many of his advisors to the Eastern Bloc for military and intelligence training. By 1975, the Soviet Union is estimated to have supplied Idi Amin's regime with $12 million in financial support and $48 million in ordnance. Idi Amin used these funds and military equipment to build up his army, which he used to threaten his neighbors. Of prime concern was Kenya. Tensions rose in February 1976 when Idi Amin claimed that some regions in Kenya rightfully belonged to Uganda. The tension dissipated despite Kenya being accused of impounding a shipment of Soviet arms bound for Uganda at the port in Mombasa. Then in 1976 came the hijacking of an Air France plane bound from Athens to Paris, initially by two members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and the two from Germany's Bader-Meinhof gang. Idi Amin further soured relations with the West. The plane was forced down at Etembe, and the crisis only ended with an audacious airborne raid by Israeli commandos. But one passenger, the unfortunate Dora Bloch, who held joint Israeli-British citizenship, had been taken from the airport to hospital in Kampala. After the raid, according to Uganda's Prime Minister of Health at the time, Eric Kiemba, he later escaped into exile. Mrs. Bloch was taken screaming from her hospital bed and brutally executed the same day. This incident did much to convince the world opinion that, in Amin, the international community was dealing with a madman. The Bloch affair loosened tongues in Israel, and the doctor who had served in an Israeli medical aid team in Uganda told a newspaper correspondent in Tel Aviv, "It's no secret that Amin is suffering from advanced stages of syphilis, which has caused brain damage." When in 1975, the then British Foreign Secretary, James Callaghan, had to fly to Uganda to plead for the life of a British lecturer, Dennis Hughes, held hostage in a prison after being given a death sentence by a military court. He was given a confidential file referring to the same theory that Amin was infected and insane. Amin held the Jewish and other Israeli citizens hostage while allowing the other nationalities to go free. Israeli commandos rescued most of the hostages. In the final years of his reign, Idi Amin survived many assassination attempts. His grip on power weakened, and there was a diminishing number of those who were loyal to him. In 1977, he appointed General Mustafa Adrisi as vice president. Adrisi had his own core support within the military and wielded significant power. Amin grew suspicious of him and stripped him of power, angering Idrisi's military supporters, and caused a further unrest in the country as Amin purged Adrisi's supporters. Soldiers loyal to Adrisi eventually mutinied in 1978. Amin sent soldiers to crush the mutineers who had fled across the border to Tanzania. Amin ended up accidentally invading Tanzania, and after capturing an area of Tanzania, he declared that the invasion was intentional. Amin's downfall came in 1979, after some weeks when the Ugandan troops crossed the frontier into Tanzania, looting and wrecking in villages along the Kagera River. The Tanzanian president, Julius Nyerere, retaliated with dispatching an armored column led by 3 tanks. Hundreds of Ugandan exiles volunteered to join it, and when it triumphantly entered Kampala, it was led by a young Ugandan army officer, Colonel Oyite Ojo. Libya's maverick leader, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, had begun sending troops to help shore up the regime, but hastily reversed the airlift after some 400 Libyan casualties. Amin followed them into a brief exile in Tripoli and then moved to Saudi Arabia, where he was given a villa in Jeddah on condition that he remained incommunicado indefinitely. The Saudi motive was to silence him because of the harm they believed he was doing to Islam. After Tanzania organized a counter-offensive, Idi Amin realized Uganda would probably lose the war, and he tried to save face by offering to settle the conflict in a boxing match between him and Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere. Regrettably, the Tanzanian president ignored the message. On April 11, 1979, Kampala was captured, and after a brief but failed attempt to rally support for his cause, Idi Amin fled the country. The following years saw him find protection in Saudi Arabia. He continued to fund his supporters during the Ugandan Bush War that followed. Many groups of rebels in Uganda fought for Idi Amin's return, but they eventually failed. In 1989, Amin caused a serious incident by leaving Saudi Arabia without permission and flying to Zaire, today the Democratic Republic of Congo. He was immediately arrested. Saudi Arabia eventually agreed to allow him back into the country, and Idi Amin spent the rest of his life there. He became a fruitarian and earned the name of Dr. Jafar for his love of oranges. He died at the age of 78 of kidney failure in 2003 and was buried in Ruwais Cemetery in Jeddah.
You should advise General Amin not to drink. This is very important. This is the most important, because if a public learn that you are a drunkard, automatically they lose confidence, and even they can say that if I am going to get operation by that doctor, he's a drunkard, he will not do anything, and they will completely refuse. I am telling you sincerely, and it is true, I must be frank to you and I tell you this, because also to drink and overdrunk, it is not very good. You will not even enjoy more, because you will not even have sense. But if you drink very little, you feel very happy, very proud, and you talk to your people.
Idi Amin was a polygamist who had at least 6 wives. He was charismatic, with a sense of humor that showed through his public life. He titled himself His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal El Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, VC, DSO, MC, CBE, Lord of all beasts of the earth, and fishes of the sea, and conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general and Uganda in particular. He also claimed to be the uncrowned king of Scotland. His behavior was noted as being erratic. He would be happy and laughing in one moment, and murderously angry in the next. He was also a brutal dictator, responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. What do you think about the legacy of General Idi Amin? Was it for Africa or against Africa? Some said everything that has been said about him was propagated by the West, as the interests of the West go against the interests of Africa. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It's been Namdi from Afroverse Story. See you in the next one.